So DuckTales is a thing. The revival, the new 2017 one. It's also just called DuckTales, so it's hard to distinguish. But I'm talking about the new DuckTales, and it is so fun. I loved watching the original show. I was a little late to the game on that one because we didn't have a channel that aired it when I was growing up. Also the fact that the show ended before I was born. But the crazy adventures that Huey, Louie, and Dewey went on with their Uncle Donald and their great Uncle Scrooge were amazing. And because Disney is all about capitalizing on the nostalgia of millennials so they can make all of the money, they made a new DuckTales. And I gotta say, it is just the tops. I think I may be starting to like this one more than the original, to be honest. Disney has really pulled out all the stops when it comes to their recent animated television shows. Those who grew up with shows like the original DuckTales or Dexter's Lab were inspired by these shows to become animators and voice actors and creators, and are now creating shows that do so much more than we ever thought cartoons could. The result is shows like this new DuckTales. It's so expertly created to appeal to new audiences, both young and old, and hold on to the original fans. It's fun, adventurous, and it feels brand new, but without betraying the ideas and values of the original show. It begs viewers to stay tuned for the roaring adventures of the original, even though there are new characters, new stories, new voice actors, new writers, and new showrunners. This show took something old and revered by its fans, and created something that just might be better than what we had in the first place. Again, that's just my opinion, but at the very least, I think the show's on par. So today, I want to talk about DuckTales 2017, because apparently that's what it's called. The original DuckTales premiered in 1987 and had over 100 episodes, a movie, and 4 seasons before it ended in 1990. That's still 2 years before I was born. People out there thinking I'm old for liking PlayStation 1 games, or knowing what a PlayStation is. The show was inspired by the comics Uncle Scrooge by Carl Barks and Don Rosa, which is still running today, by the way, and features members of the extended Duck family going on adventures. The show was created by Jim Magan and Brad Landreth, and is still considered one of the greatest animated children's shows of all time. And it's got possibly the best opening song of any show ever. Full stop. Seriously, right now, try not to sing along. You can't do it. You can't do it. The show was so popular that there was a whole extended universe of shows that were loosely connected, or at least in the same kind of adventurous vein as DuckTales. The show started a kind of golden age of Disney animated television, and we're only really seeing a revival of that in recent years with shows like Gravity Falls, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and most notably, a return to Duckburg with DuckTales 2017. Disney's television channel for children, Disney XD, stated that they would be reviving DuckTales with the hopes of bringing back the beloved franchise. Thanks to developers Matt Youngberg and Francisco Angoñez, the new show graced the small screen in 2017. Duh. But the question remained, could the show ever be as good as our nostalgic breakfast cereal sugar coma Saturday morning minds remember the old one being? And more importantly, was the theme song as good? As it turns out, the theme song was the same, but it was updated and sung by someone new who does a fantastic job. And that is basically a reflection of the show as a whole. All the characters were given new voice actors, and they went all out with the casting. David Tennant as Scrooge McDuck, Danny Pudi as Huey, Ben Schwartz as Dewey, Bobby Moynihan as Louie.
Interesting fun fact, Moynihan and Piece of Toast hate each other.
David Tennant as Scrooge McDuck, Kate McCucci as Webby Vanderquack, David Tennant as Scrooge McDuck, and of course Tony Anselmo returning as the voice of Donald Duck. And oh hey yeah, David Tennant is playing Scrooge McDuck! It's a big deal, okay? I love David Tennant and I love Scrooge McDuck. And I don't know why everyone always wants this man to do a British accent when his native Scottish is so good. Best casting choice ever. A lot of minor characters return as well, such as Launchpad McQuack and Flintheart Glumgold, the Beagle Boys and Ma Beagle, the Sorcerer Magica, but the show also introduces a lot of new characters, such as Magica's niece, Lena Brewing, and many, many more. It's spoiler time for the new DuckTales. The show follows the basic premise of the original, with the triplets Huey, Louie, and Dewey going on adventures with their Uncle Donald and their great Uncle Scrooge. The show begins with Donald doing his best to look after the boys in the absence of their mother. Against his better judgment, Donald takes the boys to live with his Uncle Scrooge.
Donald Duck.
Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge?
Because he has the means to take care of them. I mean, Uncle Scrooge got them fat stacks. The dude can swim in pools of money. I think he can find some disposable cash to look after 3 boys and his nephew. However, Donald is reluctant to do so, as he does not get along with his Uncle Scrooge, due to a falling out they had some time ago. The triplets are then introduced to Webby Vanderquack, who is their age and is just as exuberant, if not more so, than the boys themselves. They then begin adventuring with their great uncle and new friend all over the world, where they, well, might solve a mystery or rewrite history. This time around, however, there is an overarching mystery. Whatever happened to Della Duck? That's right, Huey, Louie, and Dewey had a mother. Obviously. But now the show is going to answer that long-burning question and give us more badass female characters in one fell swoop. So the boys and Webby try to figure out whatever happened to their mother, and in the process discover that Scrooge and Donald's falling out is actually directly related to the disappearance of Della Duck, who is in fact still alive and has been diligently trying to return to her boys, both Scrooge and Donald and her children, because she's been trapped on the moon of all places. It's not exactly an easy place to escape from.
I searched the moon.
Not hard enough.
So Della is introduced to the show and slowly joins the main cast in their adventures. The boys get to know their mother, and she is reconnected with the world and her family. And this might be my favorite part of the whole show.
My heart, it's too full.
Normally I wouldn't spoil so much, but I really wanted to talk about why this is so great. Not only does Paget Brewster do a killer job bringing Della to life, but the way her character is written reflects the personalities of all three of her children, because, you know, they would have gotten it from her anyway. That's right, Huey, Louie, and Dewey all have different personalities now on top of having separate voice actors. Huey is adventurous and curious about the world and goes into it with an always be prepared attitude. Dewey is now driven by his need for wealth and is always trying to make a quick buck. And Louie is now interested in adventure for the pure thrill of it and is often the one who's most keen to find their mother through the call of mystery. I think that's who each of them are. Honestly, it's still a little hard to tell them apart. But Della Duck is shown to have parts of all three, as well as that Duck family determination, spirit, and that certain je ne sais quoi. The show is fantastic, and if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it, because as far as revivals go, this one is basically the best you will find anywhere. It's just a really fun watch. I think this is because the show is not afraid to try new things with pre-existing characters or to switch up the formula of the original show by introducing new characters. The part that is so perplexing is that Disney and many other film or television companies haven't seemed to notice why this show is so successful with audiences and critics. Doubtless, you've noticed a recent trend in movies and television shows of creating reboots and revivals of old shows or films. As I said earlier, there's this kind of nostalgic malaise infecting the zeitgeist, and corporations want to make money off of this because, hey, it seems to be working so far. So audiences constantly cry for the return of their favorite TV show or a remake of such and such movie, and then that movie comes out and people malign it because it was quote-unquote terrible. But the problem is that audiences often have no idea what they actually want. That's why focus groups often water down great ideas. The original focus test of The Little Mermaid showed that test children did not respond particularly well to the song Part of Your World. You know, the song that the whole movie basically hinges on, both thematically and narratively, but they stuck with it because otherwise, you know, the movie would fall apart. And that turned out to be a smart idea because The Little Mermaid is why we have the Disney Renaissance. Recently, Disney has been pushing for live-action remakes of their classic musical animated movies. In theory, I have no problem with the idea of creating new versions of these stories in a different medium. Stories have been adapted and changed for centuries. Adapting fairy tales is how Disney became the animation giant they are today. But when these new remakes come out, they pale in comparison to the originals and are often critically panned by audiences and professionals. I think this is because the movies don't do anything new in terms of their storytelling. Aladdin was probably the most entertaining of the new remakes, and the best part of that was that middle section where they have the characters doing this kind of social dance, and in some cases actually dancing, around each other trying to figure out what the other one is about. And guess what? That part wasn't in the original movie to nearly such a large extent. This section is a very comedic and engaging piece of media where the actors are given a chance to try something new with their roles. Later in the movie, Jasmine is given an awesome power ballad, and I personally don't think it fits the tone of the rest of the movie, but it's still a great song and helps resolve the conflict that was also written a new way around Jasmine. Live-action Aladdin was not the best movie I have ever seen, but it was entertaining when it was trying something new. The new Lion King, on the other hand, was a shot-for-shot remake using new photorealistic CGI technology, and a lot of people complained about how unengaging the characters were and how the movie did nothing new. I have to agree. I will say that on the grounds of craft, shooting a whole movie to look this real is awesome, and I don't care who you are. But The Jungle Book was the test to see if this kind of technology would work, and it took more risks that paid off in terms of telling a new story and adding more to the movie's entertainment factor. Leaving that behind and looking at other aspects, I do think that recasting a large majority of the characters to have black voice actors, seeing as how the characters would have been native to Africa, was very important socially, but the story itself does not change in any meaningful way. And it's not as though it couldn't have. There were hints of possible conflicts and side stories that are not in the original in this new movie, but the movie does nothing with them. At the end of the day, if someone were to ask me if I wanted to watch The Lion King, I would probably always defer to the classic animated version, with its flaws, missteps, and all. It's also worth noting that the remakes of these stories may also be a more sinister attempt by Disney to further entrench their version of the fairy tales into the minds of their audience and keep the reverence for those classic stories separate from their fairy tale origins, allowing Disney to keep the rights of those characters out of the hands of the rabble for that much longer. What DuckTales does as a revival and a reboot of its source material was risky, certainly, but the show premiered 30 years after the original and 60 years since the first comic strip of Uncle Scrooge. Things were changed when the show was first adapted from the comic strip, and so again were things changed for this new show. The risks paid off, but even if they had not, at least risks were taken. Maleficent, for instance, is less of a remake and more of a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but at least it's new and entertaining. If Disney is really going to continue to recreate their old classics in live action, I really hope they pay attention to their own successes and take a look at DuckTales, because it proves that what audiences say they want is not the same as what audiences actually want. It proves that it is possible to create successful shows and movies that keep the themes and essence of their originals while still reinventing characters and stories and introducing new ideas. But the fact that DuckTales can hold on to those adventurous roots, still be recognizable while having new characters and stories is why it is the greatest reboot or revival of anything on television, hands down. Except maybe Carmen Sandiego. And that is why you should watch DuckTales 2017, or the DuckTales Revival, or whatever you... Just go watch DuckTales. Here are some more reasons why you should watch it if I have not already convinced you. Did I mention that David Tennant is freaking Scrooge McDuck? And on top of recreating the main characters, the way classic villains are introduced is also awesome. I didn't really have time to mention it much, but there's a through-line narrative from episode to episode that starts with the mystery of Della Duck and slowly turns into this big grandiose story that affects Duckburg and the world. I think Disney might be trying to attempt to use this as a franchise starter, because everything has to be a franchise. But there's this episode where Edgar Wright plays what is essentially Christopher Nolan as he's trying to create The Duck Knight Rises, which was also a great show from that era. But along with that, there was another episode that was clearly a backdoor pilot for The Three Caballeros. Goofy made a cameo on an episode that was a brilliant fourth wall break, so maybe a Goof Troop reboot? Or Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers would also be good. Fucking Tailspin? I don't know. Either way, DuckTales. Hey, thanks for watching that video. Let me know if there's any other awesome revivals of cartoons or movies that you think are on par with DuckTales, or if you'd like to see like Quack Pack come back. While you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe even share if you're feeling it. Don't forget to stick around for awesome episodes of This Is a Thing and our weekly podcast called Cinemasters Ultimate Timeline.